Look, I got a testimony. I gotta tell him what God did. I'm calling God the homie. He took me out of the mosh pit. I will contest the phony. Separate demons and God's kids. I gotta spread his word, so I'ma show you who the God is. The word is my weapon. I move like a general.
Hi, thank you everybody, and welcome to Walk With Me. This is your host, JJ. I thank you all for joining me. You guys could be doing anything right now or listening to anything, but you've taken this little moment of time to walk with me on Bible discussion. I really appreciate it. I really hope you get something out of it. I hope it edifies you and strengthens you. I really hope that you can take something away from it, and I hope it makes you a stronger person living for God. So, and got to take care of business. I have my sponsors, Templar Chronicles 1, New Players. It's coming out in audiobook form very soon, and you'll recognize the voice. So, that's coming out very soon. And then you have the artist who does my bump music. He does do other tracks and things like that on demand. You can listen to some of his work at True Bars Lyricist on Yahoo, and I believe he has some songs on Spotify. Please understand there are some explicit lyrics, so just so you know. But he does do all types of music, but he will take care of your artistic and music needs. Also, my biggest sponsor today is going to be Exquisite Creations. She's coming out with this big reboot later on this month, I believe. She makes a lot of cups and tumblers, what we call them. And she's going to be branching out maybe into some jewelry, maybe into some shirts and things like that. So that's all. That's a lot of future things coming up. I know they're really excited, and I really thank them for their sponsorship. Now, all that's out of the way. Now, if you've been following the podcast, and I guess I'm supposed to say, walk with me, right? Okay. So walk with me now. So if you've been following the podcast, you've been walking with me, and we've been walking into how, what the terms dispensation was. What does that mean? And why there are such things as dispensations. And we just finished dispensation number 2, which was the dispensation of human conscience. Now, before we get into this dispensation, you'll notice that there's going to be some subtle changes in how people relate to each other. And the one thing to take away from in each dispensation, there are always going to be a set of rules. Man breaks those rules. God judges. And then there's a reset button. Okay? And that's the way I call it, the reset button. God resets the button. And there's a whole different new starting. Okay? So now we're going into dispensation number 3. Now, dispensation number 3 happens after the flood, directly after the flood. God doesn't generally wait any period of time between dispensations because one starts the next, and the end of one starts the next. And there's not like any type of ambiguity time in between. Okay, so as we've seen, the dispensation of innocence ended with people not being very innocent. And the dispensation of conscience ended up with people not having very much consciousness. Not consciousness, conscientiousness. So, and it ended up that everyone was just thinking about evil continually, and God said, okay, you know what? Wipe it all. Except But no, you better do what I tell you. You better get in this boat. You better get in this boat the way I tell you, when I tell you. And Noah did that, and they got into the boat. From the time Noah went into that boat, he was in there for something like a year and 17 days in that one boat. Okay. And that boat was pretty big, just doing the math after the last episode. And just to give you kind of a scale, if you ever seen like a railroad boxcar, you could put 1,100 boxcars into the ark. So the ark was not a little thing. It wasn't like a little SS Minnow fishing boat. Please understand that. I know people draw it like that. It's not accurate. So after the flood, Noah's ark came to rest on Mount Ararat. Now, that was actually 500 miles away from where it began. Where it began was a place that we call Mesopotamia. Okay? When he came out, everything was washed clean, everything was reset. And just like Noah was starting a new life, the earth was new too. Clip that on your mind. At the beginning of dispensation, everything was reset. You might think it wasn't, but it was. All right. So the very first thing Noah did when he came out of that ark was to make an altar and sacrifice to God, which is really what we should be taking a lesson from Noah on this. Because when you become new, when you've been renewed, and when you've gone through this thing, it's always good to thank God for it. God then set about some new rules. First off, the ground wasn't cursed anymore. So if you wanted to grow crops would grow right. If you wanted to eat a certain animal, you could eat a certain animal, because it was at that time that you could eat the flesh of every little thing, but you had to make sure that the blood was drained, and it had to be prepared correctly, and because that was it. And the law of capital punishment was established. So if you really want to keep it simple, it was called an eye for an eye. But the big thing God said was, you know what? Next time I'm not going to destroy earth with water. I'm going to destroy it with fire. Now, I would say read 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 6 through 7. But remember, if I give you a verse, and we start talking about a verse on here or two verses, best case scenario, read the entire chapter, because context is important. If you don't have time for that, read a couple verses before that and a couple verses after that. And God also showed a sign. And what he did was he put a rainbow in the cloud. And what the rainbow was supposed to do was to kind of remind God and remind man of this covenant. And at that point, it was determined that, well, maybe man should have a leader, an earthly leader, in a roundabout sort of way. So going back to Noah now. So Noah had 3 sons. He had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the world became populated again. Noah began to be a farmer, and he had a vineyard. Now one day, Noah decided to have a little bit Boom Farm strawberry, a little bit too much of that. And he got drunk. And Ham did not show the proper respect or take care of him in this drunken state. He just laughed at him. Now, it wasn't the fact that he looked on his nakedness, as some people like to say. He really mocked him. So, but Shem and Japheth actually walked backwards with a cloth and covered him. And because of that, you will notice something different about how God judged. When Noah came to himself, he cursed Ham. Now, let's just pause right here. There will be people who will say to you that the Bible is racist. And this is a very tragic thing to say because they're taking something out of context. And what they're going to take out of context is what we're about to talk about right now. Was when Noah cursed Ham and said, Ham, you will be a servile race. You're going to be a servant of servants, and you're going to serve Shem's descendants, and because their descendants are going to be blessed by God and yours aren't. And Japheth was promised that God would make him a huge nation and he would dwell in tents of Shem. So now that you have three destinies, the sons of Noah still disobey God. They went forth to one place. God told them to go out and repopulate the earth. They went to one place. They went to the plains of Shinar. And the whole world was of one language, and everything was good, right? They all came from one parental home. They all spoke one language. All was good. And then somewhere along the line, they said to themselves, you know what? I'm going to have my way on this. Because, you know what? They were talking to us about this flood thing, and I don't want to go through that anymore. Now, let's pause here. Let's pause right here again. Why would you think about going through the flood again if you weren't trying to sin? What? Listen, this is what they did. They said, we don't want to go through the flood again. We don't want God to kill us all again. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this tower to heaven, and then we're going to be up there with God. Where did you hear that before? When the devil said, I will ascend to the heights of God. So the devil is still around. The devil wasn't wiped away. The devil is spiritual, so he's not going to die. So you have this thought now spreading through the descendants of the three sons of Noah. So they traveled east, and then they said, you know what, let's go ahead and start building this tower. And they built this tower, and they built it, and they built it, and they built it. And then even God allowed it to happen because he wanted to prove a point. He said, look at what man can do once they put their mind into one accord. And even still, notwithstanding the fact that the only reason why you would want to escape the flood that I already said is not going to happen is just because you were going to sin again. And you knew you were going to sin again. And you thought that maybe at some point your thoughts would be evil continually, just like it was before. But I would like to remind you, and this is out of the book of JJ. So I would like to remind you, I said I wasn't going to flood the earth anymore. So not sure what you're doing here. So they're building this tower, and they're building it, and they're building it, and they're building it. And here's where we get into human government. Because God said, yep, they have gotten themselves in one mind and one accord. They're going to build this tower, but they don't realize that there's like an area of space between the atmosphere and where we are, and they're going to build this thing, and they're all going to come up there and run out of oxygen and die. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to mess up their languages. And once they mess up, once they get the languages messed up, they can't be in one mind or one accord because they can't communicate with each other. And there's no Rosetta Stone, so if you spoke Chinese, if you spoke Mandarin, there's no way you could then turn around and speak Burmese. There's no way you're going to speak Latin to the person who spoke English. There's no way. And so what happened is construction ground painfully to a stop It ground painfully to a stop. And then everybody ended up leaving, and they called the place the Tower of Babel. Now, I'm always in tune to names. So I was really curious when the app Babel came out. And I think it's spelled differently, but I was really curious about it because it was also a language learning app. And, I noticed stuff like this. So it was just surprisingly that they named it. And I don't even know if they knew what they were doing when they named it. But that's what they called it. It was the Tower of Babel because Babel meant confusion at the time. And being that they were going to make a name for themselves and escape whatever coming judgments, that was not going to work for God. So there was a guy by the name of Nimrod, and we often use that name as an insult nowadays. You Nimrod. So there was a guy by the name of Nimrod decided that he was going to establish the government of the world with himself at the lead of the religious activity, and he was supposed to be over both the political and religious systems. He actually had it combined. We call them now theocracies. So Nimrod was the chief theocratic leader. When all in all, Nimrod didn't want to have anything to do with God, which is what started the whole let's build a tower to begin with. He wanted to be able to usurp God. Now, again, who said that before? Satan did. So you knew exactly where this was coming from. So, being that Nimrod was doing this, he is often referred to as the first person who engaged in idolatry. And they used to call him the first type of Antichrist in the Old Testament. Now, the word Antichrist, I know. We can get wrapped up in talking about the Antichrist for 82 sessions, 82 episodes. But for right now, the word Antichrist just means anything that is against God. So, and this would be, the best place to read about this is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1 through 4, I believe it is. So, the nature of the Antichrist was to, or in Nimrod's case, was to oppose everything that is like called God and exalt himself, either to the place of God or to a place superior to God. And you try to show the world that you're God, that you are the great grand potentate, or something to that effect. So, and this is why you'll hear or you'll read in the New Testament when Jesus is speaking, where he's talking about the days of Noah, because Noah's still alive at this point, So the descendants of Noah represented this way in which we live now, today. People trying to put themselves at the level of God or at the exalt themselves above God. So, and the one thing that happened before the Tower of Babel became the name of confusion was that Nimrod ruled over all of this. And it was one world, one government, religion, but under a man instead of under God. And being that man was susceptible to Satan, it was really under Satan. So now we're going to talk about, we still have a few minutes left. So now here's where the whole Tower of Babel thing started. It's not to say that the tower started after Nimrod. I'm sorry, before Nimrod. If this was already in the book of JJ, it was already kind of floating around in Nimrod's head when he was consolidating power. All right, so that's when they built the tower. And then God said, you know what, we're not going to have that. and then scattered them. Now, that leads right into the fourth dispensation. Say what, JJ? I said the fourth dispensation. We're already into the fourth dispensation because the third dispensation was human government. And so once you had one human government and then there was a judgment from God, and God said, no, we're not having that. We are not having you exalt yourself to my place. I am God, and you are man. And I understand that devil is talking to you, but don't make the same mistake that he did. And so God had to go and judge him. And then God said something that was very interesting. He said, I want to go see this thing. And it wasn't like God was sitting on the other side of the planet and didn't see it. But God was really trying to not trying to, he was actually looking into the root cause of what happened. We hear that nowadays all the time. The root cause. The root cause. The root cause was not necessarily the unity of man. And it's very important that we make sure we make this distinction. It wasn't the unity of man. It was the unity of man to promote a sin, a very big sin. A person exalting themselves to be like God. And it was the unity of man to actually create a confusion. And so that's when this tower happened. And don't ask me how far the tower got, but I know it had to have been a huge undertaking because the idea of this tower was to get everybody on this tower and get them up to a place of safety. And so when I was considering that, I was thinking about how we hear that a lot, how people are saying these things about wanting everyone to be okay. And they use that term, but really what they're doing is consolidating their power over you. Because they're talking about everyone else. And everyone has to be able to be saved. And everyone has to be able to get on this tower. And it's going to take all of you to do this. And it took a lot of individualism away from the relationship between man and God and put it all in sort of a herd mentality. So everyone worked on this thing. And God said, nope, that's not it either, son. And then he absolutely came in and confounded languages. God did not destroy that tower. I don't know where the tower is. I don't know where the tower is. Don't ask me. JJ, where's the tower? I don't know. It's somewhere. Now, did it crumble and, disappear? Did it rot away like most of the things that we build? Maybe. Is there, I'm just going off the top of my head now because I don't know. I've never actually, Googled the Tower of Babel. And because its existence, just like the ark, would naturally, say, hey, you know what? There's a Bible that exists. But the mere fact that man built it out of maybe bricks made of sand and stuff like that, because that was pretty much mankind's first experience at building cities, it probably blew away with the next rainstorm. So I don't know. It probably corroded and fell apart. Because at that time, after the flood happened, it was raining regularly then. So who knows? Maybe, I don't know. So don't ask me where the tower is or what happened to it. I don't know. To me, I consider that to be kind of like one of the things that doesn't make sense as far as being important or something to get your head wrapped up about. So I don't know. The problem is that they started trying to do it, and the reason why they were doing it was because of a nefarious reason. And then God said, nope, you're not doing that. And then that caused God to end this judgment of human government, which really was really simple, really simply fast. And remember, each dispensation kind of lasts about 1,000 years. So you kind of get the idea that this didn't just happen overnight. So when we get into next episode, we're going to be talking about the fourth dispensation, and I'm trying to kind of walk through a little bit faster on these dispensations. We're going to go back and talk about things in more detail, but I want to cover the dispensations, and then we'll get into other subjects. Right now, our next episode, we will be talking about the fourth dispensation, which is a very important dispensation to us because it's called the dispensation of promise. The dispensation of promise. So I do thank everyone who joined us today, joined me, and thank you. And please visit my sponsors, help support the podcast, because when you visit them, it supports us. And I'm still trying to struggle with if I should put like a support link or something like that. In my heart, I don't really want to, but I may have to. So, but for right now, just visit the sponsors, and I hope to see you guys on the next week, on the next episode. And again, thank you for walking with me. This has been JJ. Be blessed. Love y'all.
Yeah. True. See, I do it for Jesus. Everything I've been do, give me a reason. I got to spread all the words of a genius. Everybody need to know who the leader. See, I do it for Jesus. Everything I've been do, give me a reason.